Well, welcome to Cure America. I'm Star Parker, and the Hill is abuzz again. The bureaucrats are not back yet, but after inauguration, I think a whole lot of them will be coming back, and Biden administration can do whatever they want to do to try to say, no, they should be able to work from home. That will all change, I'm sure, because some of the agencies, some of the things that we're hearing about and know are going to come true, So therefore, the Hill will be abuzz, and so will all of downtown D.C. But in the meantime, the Congress is back, both the Senate and the House, and so we want to get into some of the details of what's going on here in Washington, in particular as we move into Christmas holidays, and then after we'll be in session. We will have a whole new Congress. Numbers are really close, but they are GOP Go Red team. And then, of course, it will be a buzz with the inauguration itself. Here at Cure, we'll be doing some events, so I hope that I'll see some of you coming in. If you're coming through Washington, D.C. during inauguration, please stop by the National Press Building and visit with us here at Cure. In the meantime, my panel is ready. I think you guys are ready. But have a whole lot of discussion about a whole lot of things. So we've already solved all the problems that are coming towards you. I was in a conversation the other day with someone. They said, there are problems to fix. I said, that's what we do here in Washington, try to fix them. At least we pretend we do. $7 trillion later, and how many in debt? $32 trillion in debt. We pretend that we are trying to solve problems here. This new administration, I think they're serious about solving some problems. So we're going to talk a whole lot about it. Our hot headline segment I want to do with a very, very new friend, a very, very significant friend, because he has joined our executive team here at Cure. I can't tell you exactly where yet because the paperwork's not complete and the signatures aren't already dry, but Donald Eason has come down from Detroit, Michigan to join us here at Cure. Businessman, activist, pastor, and welcome to Washington, D.C.
Well, thank you, Star. It's great to be here. It's great to be on a team. I really appreciate this opportunity and what you're doing here at Cure, and I'm just excited. I'm just excited to be here.
Well, one of the areas that we got to know each other a little bit was during this summer, and then in the fall when we had launched at Cure our Stand With Israel campaign. You were one of the chief pastors up there in Michigan. Numbers came in a little late in Michigan, from Michigan, that Trump had taken the state, but you kind of tell us a little bit about what you guys were doing up there.
Well, as a pastor, and Israel is significant to us as Christians, and so we celebrating or actually remembering the atrocity that happened on October 7th. So we were there, did a press conference with Cure, brought in a lot of black pastors to show our support for Israel, obviously wanting the hostages released, and just simply showing that the importance of supporting Israel at a time like this. And really Israel's survival is significant for our survival. So we just were there to help support Israel.
It fascinated me, guys, you might not know this about what they did. So Donald got a team of young people to go out and put signs. Oh, yeah. Jews' Lives Matters. It was designed just like the Black Lives Matter signs, and they put them right next to every Kamala Harris sign. It was just like, wow. Okay, you're talking the heart of the hood. They're riding by seeing all these signs, Jewish Lives Matter. I know there had to be a whole lot of confusion up there, but it seems like Trump got a whole lot of, some votes out of the Muslim and Arab community. So we'll see what happened. But Rick, what are you thinking about these days? You're Americans for Limited Government. Most of you already know Rick Manning, and you got to have some real high energy now.
Yeah,
the red team won.
Yeah, more significant than the red team winning, believe it or not, is that there's an actual real focus on right-sizing government, cutting the size and scope of government, and returning the power to the people and to the states where it rightfully belongs constitutionally. And that's something that's really new. Yeah. In the first Trump administration, there wasn't a lot of emphasis on that. Mm-hmm. And now with the DOGE Commission, they're laser focused on finding ways to make government significantly smaller, while still doing the effective jobs that need to be done to meet the needs of the American people. Yeah. And it's an exciting time to be involved in that.
They're getting hit in the news, though, a lot. And then the Musk, Vivek kind of thing. In fact, they're here on Capitol Hill today. And so we're going to hope through blackcommunitynews.com, we're going to run over there and try to run into something, and we'll bring it to you if we do. But you're right about this, Rick, in fact, I've joked with you on this panel.
Right.
Where you're not limiting the size and scope of government. Your name is out of sync with what's happening here.
Let me tell you
Americans for limited government.
how I've always looked at it. Somebody has to be the person who charges the castle and gets the boiling oil poured on them. So then the knights can come in and be all shiny and take the castle and get the credit. Well, I'm covered in boiling oil. But the fact is, the defenses were weakened. The politics changed, and now there are people with resources who are coming in. And there's some real things that can be done and should be done. And the key to this is not just doing them through the White House, but doing them through Congress, so they're harder to reverse.
That's right. Oh, my goodness. So that's excitement, and we will be covering that continuously coming into when that administration gets here. This is a really exciting time. But for you, too, I'm sure, over at Eagle Forum, you guys know Chris Ullman at Eagle Forum. And, in fact, the picture you see behind me, this is before I even met Chris, because it was on the anniversary of Dobbs. And we then met, and we're in the same picture. That wasn't what Stand for Life, but yeah, we're just excited about some things. So, and Eagle Forum, tell those that are newly watching a little bit about your organization so that they will know what you're tracking here in Washington as we go into this new administration.
Well, we're a conservative pro-family organization started by Phyllis Schlafly 52 years ago, and we really follow anything that impacts the family. And that is pretty wide, as you know. Everything from abortion to the trans to spending, because paychecks and how far your money goes is very important.
And not just there. The families are the ones who are actually paying most of the tax burden, because they're the ones that get up and go to church on Sunday morning and live their lives correctly. So they're paying the taxes. So it is economic as well.
They want to raise their kids. We're concerned about national defense because of moms send their babies off to war or to serve in the military. So all these issues.
Or to walk to school. And now with the broken border for the last 4 years.
Broken border, education, you name it.
You're involved in it,
But speaking of abortion and the DOGE Commission, one of the things Vivek Ramaswamy said was that we're going to defund Planned Parenthood. And that is great. Now, Donald Trump said abortion belongs in the states. Great. Cut off all the funding by the federal government to Planned Parenthood and everything else. We will take it. Thank you very much. Let's get it done.
Let's get it done. And finally, as Rick pointed out, there are a lot of things that have been promised over time in a variety of areas. And this administration, Marty, it's almost like this is his legacy. You know, when you think about a productive narcissist, according to the book that McCovey did years ago. Trump didn't make the book, but he talked about that A-type person who every now and then a businessman will come in and throw a brick against the wall when things are not operating correctly. And there's a lot of fear in town right now. Marty Dannenfelser here at CURE, Vice President Government Relations. So he's the one who has been out there with all of what's happening as people are moving around the deck chairs to figure out what they're going to do next. So what are you taking away in the headlines right now?
Well, I'm really struck by what's going on with the border issue, that you have Tom Homan coming in now as the border czar, and you have even Mayor Adams in New York City saying, well, he's willing to talk to them. He's getting a lot of blowback about that.
Tell us about him, because people might not know who he is.
Well, Mayor Eric Adams, he's a former...
No, not the mayor.
Oh, mayor. Well, the mayor
we kind of know. I think he's been in the headlines lately. He might even be in jail by the time the inaugural happens. I mean, well, I didn't really say that, but no. He's got a lot of issues right now, but no.
Well, Tom Homan is a former top official in the Customs and Border Enforcement field, and the Border Patrol was thrilled when Trump appointed him to be the border czar, because now they feel like they can actually do their jobs. They're not going to just be babysitters and so on. They're going to actually be able to secure the border. They've seen what's going on at that border, and I think when you see someone like Mayor Adams now saying in New York City, saying that he's willing to talk to them, you're seeing all this crime. You're seeing all this being overrun with these migrants, that they can't take care of the people. They're pushing kids out of playgrounds and out of gyms and so on to house all these people. You have these gang members coming in, and we don't know how many terrorists are coming through and maybe lying in wait to do harm to our country. So Tom Homan is going to be very serious about that, and they're going to really start with those who are committing the crimes. And you're seeing a split within the Democrats and even within the mayors of the big cities. The mayor of Chicago is saying, we're going to push back, we're going to Trump-proof against this, and
Send
so on.
all the criminals to us. Okay,
but the mayor of New York is recognizing reality. We'll see what happens in practice, but Tom Homan is saying he's real serious about this, and he's saying, look, if you don't cooperate with the federal government, you could be going to jail because you are required by law to cooperate.
To Mayor Adams' credit, I think he's in almost the same position that the American voters were, that they've known both sides. We saw New York work under the leadership of Rudy Giuliani, and then you move away from that, you start to miss it. And Eric had come in with a lot of promises that conservatives and center rights and libertarians thought, well, maybe we'll give him a shot. And next thing you know, he uncoats as a real hard liberal. So let's hope that he really tries to recover New York the same way the American voters saw life without Trump and said, we don't like what we've had the last 4 years, so we're going to give them other opportunity. So, Donald, I'm thinking about Detroit, where you're from. You guys actually went through that needed transformation. The city was, what, a couple of million, and then went down to 600,000? People will move with their money, which means the taxes, which means now we're broke, which means now what do we do next? And so you started seeing a whole lot of revitalization up there.
Yeah, Detroit, you know, as a kid, I went to school actually in downtown Detroit, and it was bustling city, and I actually saw a decline. So it's good to see it's coming back. But what's going on? Rick mentioned DOGE, or he mentioned the Department of Government Efficiency. I can remember as a kid.
I got to get used to calling it DOGE. I want to call it DOGE, but whatever. Go ahead. We got to do the DOGE.
Well, DOGE is it started really to me as a meme coin.
Yeah, that's what everybody's saying, a crypto coin or something. Yeah.
Elon Musk crypto coin is promoting with this agency.
This is going to be a fun next 4 years. Go ahead. What happened?
And so I think that's like very critical, because I can remember in the 8th grade, which is going back a long time, like 1979, and we were talking in our government classes about how much the government was spending on toilet seats and hammers and things like that.
In the 8th grade. Oh, you remember that?
Totally.
Yeah. Well, you know, reminds me yesterday, remember we were on Capitol Hill, and okay, we were over on Capitol Hill because we wanted to bring you some insider scoop, and yet they were going to their party, their Christmas party, and so of course, you know, the candidate that's in the hot seat right now, we were kind of looking to see if he was heading into Christmas party, because they were pulling out all kind of stuff. But the furniture, remember we made mention of that. I was like, sure, so this is what you guys use all of our money for? It's just like rows and rows of offices with desk and lamps. And in fact, they had at one point what do you call it, like the coat rack. And I told the guys, I said, I think we need that coat rack. But Donald pulled me away and said, you're not reverting to your old life, Star Parker. Even I told her, I said, I paid for that coat rack. I tell you, I paid taxes. And so we did leave the coat rack in the Capitol. After we come back from our break, well, I've got my unique boutique that you want to meet and go into. And then after we come back, we got some other hot stories that we want to talk to you about here. And I'll let Donald finish his story as well after this message. I want to introduce you to my new friend. As you know, in this segment, the boutique segment, I like to show you different work, the behind the scenes of Washington, D.C. So I have Anthony Campo. And Anthony, your resume is incredibly impressive. For a young man, too, I'm like, okay, I have to get out my dictionary and figure out how to even say some of these words of what you do. Welcome to Cure America.
Thank you so much, Star. It's wonderful. It's a privilege to be here with you.
Now, where are you from? Tell me about yourself and how you ended up here in what many call the swamp.
Yeah, I'm from the country in Michigan, out in a small town. The little town next door I grew up has 700 people.
Oh, wow.
And I grew up in a big family, and most of them are still there in the area.
Wow.
And I went to a little Christian college in Florida called Southeastern, where you were my commencement speaker. So thank you. I said it's great to be here and meet you in person.
That
finally.
is incredible.
I was in the nosebleeds before. It's wonderful to be here and meet you.
Oh, my.
We love your work, and it's great to be on with you today.
Oh, that's amazing, because I left the campuses maybe 5-7 years ago after being on more than 300 college campuses. And as we look at the news today, I'm like, okay, Lord, thank you for moving me on. But it's good to know that those that are Christian, I did do a few of the Christian schools, remember, and are producing people like yourself. It's just incredible, because you're a fellow in regulatory modernization and alignment at the Economic Policy Innovation Center, EPIC. Remember, guys, I introduced you to EPIC once before because they're one of the policy institutes here that does incredible work. You work specifically now in the regulatory area. Your resume, you help lead interagency collaborations on a range of technical regulatory matters, contributed to international regulatory cooperative activities, and help strengthen and enforce federal information policy standards. This is really behind the scenes.
Right.
Tell us, okay, give us insight of how you got into this field and what exactly is it that you do?
Well, so I'm mentioning, just back up a little bit more. So in college, I grew up in a kind of conservative home and Christian home. And then when I went to college, I actually became a little bit of a man of the left for a while. And in my last year of college, I was studying abroad in Oxford, and I went there to prove Adam Smith wrong definitively, the father of capitalism. I thought if I can prove him wrong, then I'll prevail as a man of the left. And I got converted in that process, sort of intellectually. And I found that Adam Smith was not just some cold-hearted capitalist. He was actually a moral philosopher, and he wrote another book called The Theory of Moral Sentiments, and a lot of his ideas about the proper functioning of the economy and the legal system were based on ideas about morality and the moral foundation of society, and particularly morality that was grounded in the Judeo-Christian tradition in the West was what he focused on. So that was a big part of my kind of change in my ideas, and so I came here to work at the Heritage Foundation, a conservative organization, afterwards.
But back up. But were you studying regulatory and economic matters at the time that made you decide that I'm going to find the science behind faith, or pretend that faith doesn't exist and only find the science?
Well, I think like a lot of college students, I was really looking for what was true and right and good, and I think that I was really latching onto it there, and I wanted to lean into it. And then I came here and I was at Heritage and I was working on a wide range of issues. And while I was there, I realized that the regulatory process is really key. Because when we talk about changing policy, we always think about Congress. Congress is really important, of course. One of the things that I discovered in my time being here and evaluating the situation is that what happened for a long time is that Congress would pass laws. They'd say, we want to accomplish some general objective, and then they would give the power over to the agency, to whatever that agency is, to figure out the details. You figure out how to solve whatever this problem is in a more particular way.
And in a really good functioning governmental system, it's not a bad idea. I think the regulatory, the agencies and the departments left the founding principles, and so it's expanded government in places that it shouldn't go. Yeah. I don't know that the process needs to be just totally overhauled. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, so our Constitution, we set up 3 branches of the federal government, each which are supposed to do different things, right? Specific things. The president's supposed to enforce the law. Congress is supposed to make the law. The judiciary is supposed to interpret the law. And what's happened is, and we read this in the Federalist Papers, and Alexis de Tocqueville talked about this in his survey of America in the early days, that if we have all of those powers combined in any one person or branch or group, then you have tyranny. And that's why a lot of people left to come here, so they could get away from that, and that is what we want to have again. But today, in our executive branch, all these agencies, what you have is a blending of all of those powers. So you have the lawmaking power has been given to those agencies. They enforce that law. Once they write the rules, they enforce it, and then after they enforce it, they bring you into an in-house court. They have their own judges within the agency. So we have a real blending of the powers, which is not really what the founders intended.
And so a major overreach.
So a big part of what as I was here and working, I was evaluating all this, and I thought the regulatory process is this thing that's super bureaucratic, and a lot of people don't seem to understand it, but it seems to be extremely important. It's where a lot of the rubber meets the road on
the
policy.
Rulemaking. Well, we're seeing it now. I mean, the Biden administration, because they feel that they may have their last opportunity to make all the changes that they want, are overreaching in this regulatory areas. And now, like you're mentioning, I don't know of one agency that's not sick. The one department that's now not sick, that the liberal ideas are embedded, and they think that they have all all power and exclusive overreach objectives, and they can get away with it, and they do get away with it. So I want to ask you, because you served as a core member of the regulatory reform team for the 2016 presidential transition team, and you were a member of the beachhead team at OMB, OIRA. What in the world are these agencies? People are probably wondering, well, okay, tell me what we need to be thinking about to reverse this that you just discussed, that you just showed us, that Congress has removed itself from its core responsibility, given all that power over to these agencies and the bureaucracy of Washington, and they are not accountable to anyone.
Yeah, so you mentioned there at the beginning was the transition team. So I worked on the transition team for President Trump in 2016.
What does that mean? Like, what were you guys doing? Because there's talk about it right now. People are saying, okay, so how is President Trump going to return and get things done? There's much discussion, so they don't understand that this transition team effort, and that there are a lot of people, bright people like yourself, involved in helping shape the administrative policies.
So what happened there is, so it's basically a big group of conservative people who are helping. They help the president to prepare to take over the government, right? And so there were hundreds of us working across every area of policy. And kind of what I focus on is the cross-cutting stuff. So regulations is kind of like laws. Like laws cover all kinds of policy areas. Regulations cover all kinds of policy areas. And so I've kind of focused on the regulatory process, which cuts across all the policy domains. So that was the key team that I was on, working with the policy experts in each area to help to develop a suite of regulatory reforms that cut across the government, and some really big ones. I mean, I mentioned this in a congressional testimony last year, but was a lot of our ideas, actually, a lot of what President Trump did was he took some of the best ideas that had been out there for a while, that were well established, that people on kind of all across the philosophical spectrum had said, yes, we like that, we agree with it, but we never actually did it. Nobody ever really did it. And President Trump did that. And so you see that in a lot of the regulatory reforms. We took ideas that were recommendations from the American Bar Association, the Administrative Conference of the United States, these distinguished bodies with people, like I said, that represent kind of all parts of the philosophical spectrum, had said, we think we should have more transparency in the regulatory process. We should have more public engagement in the regulatory process. We shouldn't just have, rule by edict from Washington. Right. We should have a robust engagement with the public to come up with the best standards. And so President Trump took a lot of that and he advanced it. No regulating through guidance. So that's a big problem that we've had in Washington. There's a whole, we're supposed to change policy through laws, regulations maybe to provide some fine details, but what we've had in the last few years, and I'm concerned we'll have a lot more of it in the future, is regulating through blogs and speeches and guidance things that aren't even, there's really no serious process around it. And President Trump said, we're not doing
agenda.
that.
Well, and I don't mean to cut you off a bit, and I'm glad that he did say that. And I remember that even in rulemaking, he was, look, for every new thing you do, take away two.
Yeah.
But we're seeing it now, this overreach, especially when people have agendas like this environmental push, this climate change agenda that is now seeping into every single agency and department here in Washington. It needs to be stopped. Okay, so when you were over at OMB, what does that mean? Like, what did you do?
Yeah. So after on the transition team, we helped to prepare, help support the president's work on developing executive orders and guidances and all that kind of stuff. And then I went to OMB. So OMB is an office within the White House. It's an agency within the executive office of the president that is in charge of budget policy for the government, management policy for the government, and regulatory policy for the government. And I worked on the regulatory side. So it's basically an oversight agency within the White House that helps to manage the regulatory policy and process for all of the agencies that report into the president. So,
no, I know that people think I didn't follow any of that, and I'm hoping that that it makes. I just trust him, so I'm gonna believe that we are going to be okay as a nation. Now you're over at Epic, and you're working on some incredible things. You showed me in your book that you even have a chart that will help people follow through.
Yeah.
So we only have a minute or so. What is it that we can break this down to fifth grade level? What is it that we can can be thinking about as we're in this election year, and how important it is for people to understand the differences between these administrative approaches. What we've heard from the main media is we're going to focus you 100% on the personality of Donald Trump. We're going to pretend that there is no personality of President Biden, and some people do think that there really isn't a personality of President Biden. But there are policy differences in these two administrations. Yes,
Star, I want to say, when you mentioned the 2-for-1 program that the president put in place, that program, part of what it did was every year, if you look at the growth of regulatory costs on the public, it grows by billions and billions of dollars every year. When we looked at the first 2 years of the Obama administration, it was almost $300 billion of regulatory costs added in those first couple of years.
$300 billion of added regulatory costs, just things that we don't even know what they are and what they were regulating. You just find out that you have limited product at the store now.
That's
or
right.
the price is doubled on something that you normally have to buy, like your refrigerator or your new washing machine.
That's right. Right now it's almost 470 billion so far in the Biden administration. But what you saw when President Trump got elected was that rather than going, the records of my agency every year, the costs increase. When President Trump got elected, they went down through the x-axis into negative territory, the total regulatory costs. So for the first time in our records, the government actually imposed less than $0 in regulatory costs. We actually saved hundreds of billions of dollars in regulatory costs on the public for the first time in record. So that's the difference. Instead of adding hundreds of billions, you're saving hundreds of billions of dollars of regulatory costs. A professor at University of Chicago just calculated that what that translates to at the end of last year, just the new regulations from the Biden administration, $10,000 per family. In cost. So the impact, real world impact, is $10,000 a year for regular folks in their home every year. That was as the end of last year. So we know that's going to continue to increase.
It would.
So that's the difference. It's hundreds of billions more or less. And again, it cuts across every area of policy. So do you want more aggressive requirements? And a lot of his changes, a lot of what we did was say reduce the reporting interval. So we weren't not even talking about necessarily in some cases changing the standards. We're just saying make it a little bit easier for people to comply with the standards. Make it a little bit easier to report on it, so it's not daily reporting.
Right, and we're talking not just about consumer. Business is most affected, I think, from these regulatory changes, and then we see the increase in the costs in that way too.
Yeah, and I'm just talking about the cost side, but basically all of the policies that your viewers care about, they happen through regulation. Yeah. I mean, that's where it touches down, and so. You can cut across any area of policy, and so having a president that's serious on those issues, that doesn't just say, okay, well, whatever the government comes up with, I'll support. No, he's taking the best ideas that have been out there. He's got new ideas, combined them in a way that we demonstrated, record numbers across the board. And it was an exciting time, and I think...
well, we need to get to that time again. I'll tell you one thing, because the costs are going up. People don't understand why, and it is important that they understand that politics is policy, and people are policy. And there are people behind the scenes that are working on the policies to make our lives a whole lot better. Before I let you go, what is that you have in your little book you showed me?
So
and it's on your website, too.
It's on our website, the Economic Policy Innovation Center. There are kind of these one-page documents that help to explain things about the process. So this one is just a one-pager that just kind of walks through and says, these are the steps in the process, and the public can get involved. It's not just something that's happening in Washington. There's an opportunity for the public to submit comments, and they're required by law to respond to them. They can't just ignore it. It's not just like calling a member maybe and they ignore it. This one, they actually have to respond, and so we go through some ways to provide meaningful impact in that process.
For you're like scratching your head like I did. Okay, what's in that? Oh my! They have pictures, but I love that you're saying they can get involved. Let's go to your website and let's make sure that we do make an impact, because that is a part of Washington people don't understand, that it is an activist government when we're involved in it, and it's not just about calling your legislator or going out to vote on election day or during the primaries. It's also about going into the different areas that affect them. and letting your voice be heard. So I really thank you for that. But did you say your website?
It's the Economic Policy Innovation Center is the organization's name.
Yeah, but I thought
Epic.org.
Epic.org.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah,
I thought it was
yeah.
something a little more simple
sorry.
than that. Oh, well, I'm going to have Anthony back, of course, especially as we move into this season of election to make sure that we're focusing on the important things and not just what the evening news tells us is important. I'll be right back. Yes, we are in the nation's capital because the Congress is back in session. Oh, it's not the ones that you guys just reelected. They'll be here January 3rd. But in the meantime, they have a little bit of business to settle, some of the lame duck stuff, some of the try to spend our money on more things. Just coming up here to talk to you, got in the elevator with a whole bunch of furniture that's just moving round and around and around. I wanted to pick something for myself because I figure I paid for it. I pay a lot of taxes. That lamp should belong to me. And I was actually telling my colleague, hey, you know what? That little stand for our coats, we need one of those too in the office. But I decided not to steal in our nation's capital. They do enough stealing here themselves. I was so glad that the new administration will be coming in so that we can try to reduce the size and scope of government. But in the meantime, we're going to have some interesting discussions today. We've got a lot that we have to talk about. One, we have to talk about what's happened over at the Labor Department. I mean, my goodness, the right to workers, right to work state folks that you've met before on the show, they're not pleased with what's happening there at Labor in terms of a nominee. We need somebody that's for free markets, open markets, the ability for business people to get up and do their thing without oversight from government and or union oversight. So we want to get into that issue a little bit later in the show. So a lot of exciting headlines as people are preparing themselves to not only go to Christmas, but then to come back to an all-new administration here in Washington, D.C. Let me see if somebody of interest comes through that I can bring to you in a bit.
Wow, it's crowded in here.
Well, we were able to make it over here right on time to hear Speaker Johnson announce what's happening inside this moment.
We're very frustrated by what the Biden administration appears to be doing right now, and that is, as you said, shoveling money. As someone said on a hidden camera on a clip that I saw, someone in the administration who's charged with distributing the funds said it's like we're dumping gold bars off the Titanic here at the end. We take over in January, and until then, the big government Democrats are still in charge, and they're spending money, in our view, recklessly. And so, yes, we've had a lot of discussions over the last couple of days about what our authority would be to claw some of that back and to stop it. It's a serious challenge, and we need to stop it and expose what's happening. That's what this effort will be about going forward. There is an enormous amount of waste, fraud, and abuse in the government. And I think everyone knows that intuitively. And so the efforts here, both with our subcommittees that are being created here and with the DOGE effort itself, will be to explore that, to investigate it, and lay it bare for the American people to see. I think that's how we'll begin to bring about the change that we all need. So this is an ongoing effort. Yes.
Mr. Speaker. Some labor unions are already fighting back. They've already signed contracts to try and get this, that they could be able to work from home, things like that. Your reaction to that?
Well, there was a report that came out today. I don't know if you all have seen it, but someone did a little survey of how many federal employees are actually working in the office. By one estimate, it may be about 1% if you don't count the security personnel that are covering these buildings. That is absurd. And it's not something the American people will stand for. And so one of the first things that I think you'll see is a demand from the new administration and from all of us in Congress that federal workers return to their desks and get back to the work that they're supposed to be doing. I think that is common sense. What you're going to see here, the overriding theme here, is a return to common sense and a return to accountability and efficiency in government. I think that's going to serve the people well. There'll be a lot more to tell you all in the days ahead. Thanks for being here.
To keep the Unique Boutique segment going. We get many of your messages that you kind of like knowing who else is in Washington. Who are the good guys? What are they doing? And in particular, is they're nonprofits, so you can also help them because many of them have unique roles in unique spaces, as you guys do. You know, this is unique role in unique spaces, and a lot of people just don't see that part of Washington. But in the meantime, the parts that you do see, oh my goodness, do you ever see them? And yesterday on the trans, okay, so Tennessee decided that we are just even this word, gender affirming care. Really? why are they better marketers and messaging than us? They changed the name of absolutely everything from the pagan progressives to make people confused on something that is mutilating. And so I just want to go into that topic a little bit with my panel. But guys, I'm going to start with Chris, because Chris, you were over at the Supreme Court when they were hearing this and, going into the Supreme Court taking up the decision, because, a lot of people think about federalism and what's the role of federal government to get involved in state matters anyway. But the Biden administration, I guess, decided, hey, we're going to sue you. We don't want you doing that, taking away our ability to mutilate young kids. But so going in, it sounded, a lot of the narrative was, ooh, even the conservatives are going to rule against the state. But coming out, that's not what the narrative is.
That was not what the narrative that the news media said. Now, obviously, the 9 Supreme Court justices can do whatever they want. But if you look at the questions that they ask, they were very, very, at least the conservative right of center justices were asking, why should they get involved in this and make it a constitutional issue when really medical laws are dealt with on a state level. And this is an absolutely appropriate thing for a state to do, to protect their children. Tennessee's done it. Our chapter in Alabama was instrumental in passing that law in Alabama, which is also going through the courts. Now, if the Supreme Court decides that Tennessee was perfectly fine in passing such a law, that will help the Alabama statute. But let me tell you, outside the court yesterday, there were 2 rallies going on. One was people like me and others who were supporting the rights of children to be protected. And the other was the trans lobby. And some of those people were, honestly, one guy came over and it was, we all felt like it was very demonic. He was screaming things. I don't know if you all know about Chloe Cole. She's a young woman who had her breast removed and has detransitioned. And she has now, as an advocate for children, was speaking out, was joyous at the fact that children were going to be protected. And this one man had a bullhorn and was just yelling the most vile things at her. And me and a number of people I was there with, we were just holding hands, just praying, Lord Jesus, just protect us from this demonic spirit. They are after our children. They do want the right to have doctors mutilate kids.
That's right. Because those children represent the image of God.
Yes.
And this is this is Psalm 2, the kings of this earth set themselves against God and against his anointed, saying, break the bonds, cast his cords from us. Marty, one of the things that people weren't expecting from the conservative side of the court was to bring up what's happened in Europe on these matters, because, it was conservatives that say don't look to European law for making our law, but yet Europe kept coming up because they're ahead of us on this, and now they're saying, we don't want to go that route anymore. You did a report here at CURE, well, not you alone, but you're in charge of the department that does our monthly studies, and you guys looked into this whole trans question. Those of you that might want a copy, I think it's up on our curepolicy.org website. Tell us what you're thinking about this issue. You weren't over there at the Supreme Court yesterday, but you've been following this very closely.
Well, it was interesting that Tennessee, in defending their law, made a very big point about this, that you have 4 countries in Europe, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and the United Kingdom, that have all pulled back on this. And you're right, they were in the early stages. They were way ahead of us on this, and now the United States is doing a lot of it as well. But they have put up at least the yellow light is flashing, and in some cases closer to a red light. And they're moving away in general from the hormone and the surgery treatment to more psychotherapy. Focus on psychotherapy. There's lots of young people and teenagers. They go through periods of questioning and so on. But to do something as dramatic as this, the human body is so intertwined. And when you start messing around with these things, it has an impact on physical and emotional aspects of the human person. So there's been a lot of intimidation in the medical community in the United States and in the media and so on in the United States. So people, I think, are the research community. They're afraid to speak out. And you're only allowed, according to some state laws, you're only allowed to affirm a person. You can't throw up a caution, and you can't say, well, I don't know that it's really necessary in this case. If they're even leaning or thinking that way, you're pressured to affirm that position. So they then go through this dramatic change that really, when they become adults, they might say, what did I do?
What did I do? Exactly. And some of that is even against the parents' involvement. I mean, they're doing this stuff in the dark, talking to 10 and 11 and 12-year-olds about when they come in to think, they're just tomboys, and now all of a sudden they're into this change in your whole gender.
California passed a law which makes it so schools, districts, teachers, nurses are prohibited from telling parents. Okay, that's California. California is coming everywhere. Let me give people an example why.
I just want to digest what you just said. I want everyone to digest what you just said. California passed a law where you are prohibited from telling a parent when their child is struggling sexually.
100%.
Trying to figure out, who am I?
And oh, by the way, because of the gender affirming care philosophy, no one's allowed to talk to that child about the downside of the treatments, of the mutilation, that it's permanent, that you never get it back.
You talk about that's Laura's story, but I'll never get my breast back. It's just like, it's chilling. I keep hearing it over and over, and I met her years and years ago, and now she's even married to a wonderful young man and active in the movement. But this is real.
This is real. And let me give you the viewers here in a specific instance. This is why you should care, even if you can be, this is because it gets to be personal. In Prince George's County, Maryland, which is adjacent to Washington, D.C., in 2021, a teenager who was autistic attempted suicide. The school decided that he obviously failed, decided that it was because he was gender confused. And they started pushing for him to be turned into a her. And this autistic child, just reacting, the parents said, no, we're not doing that to our kid. The parents, through a series of court decisions, the parents were prohibited from sharing this with their child because it wasn't deemed to be gender affirming care, and eventually lost their child to the state, who have proceeded, or in the process of proceeding of making him a her. Oh my God. He's still going to be autistic, still going to have all those problems, but you know what he's not going to have? He's going to have all those problems with a different set of hormones running through him, creating a completely different mindset for someone who already has challenges. That's evil.
That's evil.
And they took away the parents, and they said specifically, you cannot share verses from the Holy Bible to your child or expose them to it, because it's not considered to be gender affirming.
Well, that side and that worldview lost this last election, because Donald, I want you to put your pastor hat on, because this was a real issue with the church. The left did everything they could to try to get the right to not vote for Donald Trump. How dare you guys? You know his lifestyle and some of his other stuff is inconsistent with what the Bible actually says, and they wouldn't hear. And we were somewhere, I think you were with me when the Ethiopian came up to us and deliberately said, 100% of the Ethiopian community, in those black numbers of increase, 100% of us voted for Donald Trump. And why? Because I do not want my little boy told that he can be a little girl. Put your pastor hat on and speak into this, because I know that you've been working on this. And when Rick just mentioned this is so personal side of people. I'm sure you're hearing stories. This is something you would go to your pastor and say, what do I do? My kid is confused. There are problems here.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the pastor hat, because the church needs to speak up on this. And when you look at the psychiatrists and the psychologists and those that have been technically licensed to do that, they try to prohibit them and have them only give gender affirming affirmation for those that are in that so-called transition. However, a pastor, our guide is the Bible.
Right.
And so we actually tell them, no, you're a male, if you're a male, and you're a female if you're a female. We go back to the beginning. God made the male and female, and guess what? You can't go any further back than the beginning.
Right.
And so that's how He made them, and that's what they are. And then when you look at the so-called transitioning a male in a female body or female in a male body, that's not a real thing.
Well, let me ask you this. Okay, this is what, because I want to go back to
what's being promoted is a deaf culture.
Yes, okay.
Because when you try to transition a male into a female or female into a male, you destroy their ability to procreate. Wow. And so that kills off life. When you kill a baby in the womb, you're stopping life. If you say that two males or two females can get married, you're again stopping life. It's a deaf culture.
Wow.
And that's really what we're dealing with from a spiritual standpoint.
Oh, my goodness, my goodness, my goodness. Amen. But I want to ask you, though, on the personal side of this, because these kids are struggling. What is the mission? What is the church missing to not be there? Because I do agree with you that the church need to speak out on this, be very active, to make sure that people understand how demonic this is and how transformational it is, including what you just powerfully pointed out, that you're stopping creation itself, that this is against everything that we know to continue humanity. But then on the other side, you got these little confused people. You've got parents that are confused enough to allow their kid to keep going down that path. What do you, if you were in a counseling with a parent, I mean, because wasn't there even a case where the dad was trying not to have the kid affirmed, and then they moved out of the state and had the mom because she wanted it to happen, and this is
and the dad lost
and the dad lost, yeah. So what would you have said to that couple? Even though I think they were divorced,
right,
or they weren't together anymore, but let's say they walked into your pastor table and said, "We already divorced, and now our kid is just like totally ruining even what we could have thought we could have a life without each other." How do you answer those questions?
Well, again, it goes back to the scripture. The parents are the ones that God has said, you train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they'll not depart from. He's given the responsibility to the parents.
Yeah, but the parents divorced, so I think he talked about that too.
Well, if you go further, he talks about in the book of Ephesians about fathers, don't provoke your children to wrath. Right. We got to give fathers their place in the marriage, and when you live in this culture, it's becoming more feminized. I think the manliness is coming back, though, with Trump in office.
And it's interesting the kind of conversations that we're having. When I said, McClellan just talked about throwing a brick against the wall. Let's hope that doesn't literally happen. But I think a whole lot of people are thinking that it might. I mean, we've been in a civil war before, and we did recover, and we are, as Biden said, the only thing coherent, where this is about the soul of America. Well, the soul of America spoke, and the soul of America said, in a variety of areas, we're not going there. You're shaking your head. Absolutely. We're not going there, because this was a hard question for born-agains and evangelicals. And I was doing one show on TBN, and they were like, I'm the only one on the panel saying, well, yeah, but for the ones that a poll had just come out from Barna, I believe, that was showing how many evangelicals weren't going to vote, and they were mad. I mean, they were pastors, and they're angry. And I'm like, well, but maybe they just don't understand, or I'm trying to make an excuse for them.
There are real spiritual issues in this election, and while none of the candidates were perfect people, we can look at their policies, and the policy of destroying young people's lives, and telling them that they can choose their gender, that they are gods. Right, because when you tell someone you get to decide whether you're a man or a woman, not only is that anti-science, it's anti-biblical, and it messes with their heads. And we had one side saying, yes, tell everyone they can do whatever they want, and another side that said, you know what, this is a little crazy, guys. Yeah. You know, that is not scientific, and that hurts our children, and our children are the future. Yeah. And so for me, the election was very easy when I looked at it in that way.
Right. Well, well, Marty, is that what it came down to? There was much discussion. We're here. We're C3, so they send them, we work with them. But did it just come down to policy? Is that what people voted, not personality?
I think so, yeah. I think that they looked beyond personality in most cases, and they just saw that the country was going in the wrong direction. I think this whole thing with woke ideology, and they had the the thing about the Kamala cares about them and Trump cares about us and that sort of thing. So I think they just have seen it being too radical to identify with the most radical elements in this type of community, but also with the whole immigration breakdown, the breakdown of law and order, that people see the chaos in the streets on the college campuses and so on. They see these Hamas protesters coming in and taking over communities and the like. And I think they said enough is enough, and this is someone who's going to stand up and say, we're going to put a stop to this.
Because so many areas, not just the border, it was everywhere. It was like fires all over the place.
Well, the fact is, the country's broken.
Yeah.
And in the last 4 years have broken it more. But I'm going to, it is partially personality, okay? Donald Trump was the father, the male, and Kamala Harris was the female. And Donald Trump did not shy away and try to be a 90s male.
Right.
He was a 60s, 70s male.
That's right.
And I think that appealed to a lot of Black and Hispanic men.
That's right.
Because that's the role they're called to do from a biblical perspective. It struck home for them,
right.
And he didn't shy away from it. He didn't apologize for it.
Nope.
And
in fact, he went straight where they were. He went and served at McDonald's. Donald, you mentioned that. You said that because you were telling me there's been now 2 generations of these young Black men that have not even had a dad, but even the generation before them. And so they're hungry for that male presence. And you told me a story about how your wife and you were going out bike riding, and this little Black boy comes riding up next to you. And so Phyllis says, do you know him? He's like, no, but he needs a man in his life. He just wanted to ride with a man and touch it. And the Bible says the glory of children is their father. Speaking of what Rick just started the conversation on, how it is that, I think it was Wall Street Journal, somebody in there called it a rainbow coalition. They took it from what Jesse Jackson's been doing to send them down this path of just total destruction, total family dependency on government. And now Donald Trump, you're right, Rick, and I'm glad you brought it up because it did matter for him to be that hard. When they went after him about the trash, they went out and did a trash person, and Mike, who works here at Cure, we had this little Halloween thing. They did a little Halloween. I came as a cowgirl. Marty came as a New York Yankee the day after they lost. But anyway, and then but Mike Development came in as that garbage guy. It was so funny. We're talking 2 days, and all of a sudden his wife found a little vest and a hard hat and the whole bit. We'll talk about that Black man. We're going to do a couple of segments on it coming in, and I'm going to try to get you guys an incredible panel so that we can dig deeper in the question that now the left is, oh, well, they didn't really come out that strongly for him. Okay, so the bump wasn't as large as we had worked for or hoped for, but in Black males, it was huge, even if huge is only like 21, 22%.
Well, it's a couple of dynamics. Going back to the young man, yeah, we're just putting our bikes on the back of the car, and he just rolled up to me and said, can I go bike riding with you? And he's looking for a male figure. And I would real quickly, they did a study in the elephant kingdom, and they took the older male elephant or the younger male elephant out of the environment with the older male elephant. And then and the younger male elephant actually lost his mind, right? And so they put him back into the community with the older male elephant. Not only did the younger male elephant calm down, his testosterone level went down too. And so what you're seeing in our communities going to the Black male voting for Donald Trump, there was a man that they could attach to and say, okay, he's being like a man ought to be, which is caring, loving, protecting the family. He's not perfect. None of us are, right? But he exhibited those traits that young men are looking for. Yeah. And when men are in their proper position, going back to what Rick mentioned earlier about the family and the trans child, or the so-called trans child, how they went to the side of the female while the father was trying to protect them and keep them the sex that God made them. So when you take the man off his role, everything falls apart. Right. You know, if we go back to the Bible, when the Israelites were in Egypt, they killed the male child. Right. So a man being in this position and manliness coming back into the culture will help prepare our culture, help repair our culture, I should say.
I think one thing that the audience, folks, for 20 years, I did youth ministry. Okay, I kind of aged out, but for 20 years, I did youth ministry.
Aged out of being a youth or aged out of being a youth minister? Don't tell this.
Kind of both. But I was the world's oldest teenager until I wasn't. But the fact of the matter is, the single continuing theme for 20 years was boys need men in their lives. Right. And what we would see at the church was boys would come to the Sunday school, and they would literally gravitate to the males who were there, who were teaching, taking a leadership role, and would almost imprint on them. And while you only get them for an hour a week, and it's very hard to make real changes in an hour for a week, the fact is, boys who are going, girls and boys, but we're talking about boys now, boys who are going through a divorce, boys who have a single mother in the household, those things all happen in our lives. We know that. There's reasons for it. Right. But the fact of the matter is, those boys, when you take them to church, if there are strong males in the education program, encourage that relationship, because that boy craves it.
He definitely craves it, and I think that we have feminized our society enough. Chris, I'm gonna you get the last word on this because of Eagle Forum. Phyllis was telling us about this, and that we would be in this moment in the 70s and had answers to it. But before I do, I want to ask Marty, because Marco Rubio came out with a study out of his office as a senator about the role of that male and what has happened, not just in the moral issues, if you will, or the family side of it, but in that we feminize these young boys. We're starting to see a diminish of work ethic in them. We're starting to see high suicide in them. We're starting to see lost men. Can we recover? I mean, he was putting out this information. He has a lot of people want to run away from the think tank data, and we don't need one more study. We do need study. You got to know things, okay? We can't just go by a soundbite on the X to get full information. But he articulated some of the things that can be done in policy to get us back on track. Are you hopeful with the Trump administration and some of the really dominant male figures that he's putting in key places that we may be able to turn this around?
I think so. I think these are the kind of things that we'll start to take a look at now. I think it's certainly young men need meaning in their lives. They need to feel like they have opportunities and that people are caring about them. They're not seen as villains and that sort of thing. So, he's someone who really does look into things very deeply. He's going to be over at the State Department as Secretary
but he left
of State.
that jewel for us.
But he left that there.
Roadmap. Here's the crises, and here's some of the things you guys should think about.
And these are people like our friend Senator Tim Scott and others have, I think, similar views and help pick up the baton on some of these things. So I think we will see more of this going forward. Yes.
A few more minutes. Phyllis knew it. She saw it. She said, "You guys keep going down this path. You're going to have a whole generation of effeminate men."
Absolutely.
Lost. Totally lost. And they are really lost. And they're so suffering. You look in their eyes as they're dressed like girls going out on their date, and you're just like, Lord, help us.
Well, one of the things she saw back in the 70s when the Equal Rights Amendment was proposed is that what it would do is blur the lines between men and women. And she said, well, women, we are equal in dignity and worth and all those things.
Well, I have the sign. I can fry up the bacon and I can bring home the bacon fried up in a pan, but I'd rather go out to a restaurant.
Yeah, exactly.
But of course we can do it. But why should we? I don't want to get up with a hammer.
We're not the same.
No.
And we have a unique role as women, and men have a unique role as men in our society, and that is very beneficial. Yeah. And if we blur the lines, then we end up with what we have now, which is where a woman's role as a mother and a life creator is devalued, and society tells her to kill your child so you can have a career. What kind of message is that to a woman?
Well, they bought it, and they're miserable. And when Charlie Kirk tried to point it out that, no, this is not, oh my God, he's a male chauvinist, and then J.D. Vance was like, what are you doing? Well, I think a lot of women are just even afraid to say it out loud.
Exactly.
It's just like, I really do I did make some wrong decisions here, and I do want just a traditional, peaceful life with a covering.
Exactly, and women can work, but we have to understand our unique contribution to society. And what the left wants to do is erase that and say, there's no difference. In fact, you can just change your gender. You can do whatever. We don't need a strong man to be the the head of the family. We don't even need families. Women, you don't even need a man. But we do, because that complementariness is so beneficial for all of society.
But Chris, aren't they erasing women in reality?
Now.
Because now they go off. We got the current Secretary of Transportation, soon to be former, thankfully, who adopted a child.
Right.
He's in a homosexual marriage. He adopted a child, took maternity leave, and they pretend that men can have children. They pretend, and they eliminate the word woman from laws.
Right.
And it's
they have a lot of correction to go on. You had your hand up. You got a final thought, because we got a final clock coming down. So 30 seconds. Tell us what the pastor's
Chris
going to
said
say.
women can work. I would say that one of the most meaningful works is raising a child, and they've taken that away.
They've just taken that away. Well, I think we're going to see a lot of correction going on here. We're all excited. Next week, I won't be here, so we'll see what others are planning to do in my seat or with my seat. I'll be back the following week to continue these discussions. One of the things that I'm going to constantly remind you is, as individuals that keep promoting personal responsibility, Scripture's clear about what that means. In Ecclesiastes 12:13, he said, "Fear God and keep his commandments." That's it. It kind of boils down to simple, even though the simple is hard. I'll see you next week here on Cure America.